Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Mann. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 7 already, right? Episode 7 of the Modern Taoist podcast, and I thank you for coming along. We have all kinds of new people joining all the time. Of course, we have a bunch of stuff to tell you about because as we just kind of started this, if you listen to episode 1, you'll kind of get a primer of what happened and why we started this. But since we have, it's getting bigger and bigger all the time and blowing up every day, and not just here on the podcast, but on the YouTube channel as well. And we have two different things on the YouTube channel, which is at Daoananda, Daoananda on YouTube. There's two different things on the YouTube channel other than the podcast, and that is a 3-minute lesson that I do at the end of my walking meditation every day. And then there is a 30 seconds of Tao, which I have fun doing because it takes 30 seconds. But that way, depending on what kind of attention span you can deal with at the moment, because being pulled in a billion different directions, you have 3 different layers you can listen to. You can listen to the full podcast, you can listen to 3 minutes of a lesson, or you can just listen to 30 seconds of Tao. And the 30 seconds of Tao stuff is super easy to do, and so we do it every day. And then the little 3-minute walking meditation lessons, those are the most popular. We've got thousands of views on those, which is pretty cool. And another cool thing, by the way, there's also on the website now, which is daoananda.org. The .com is coming, but it's got an issue, some kind of tech thing. We are getting that fixed. But you can go to that website, and we now have T-shirts and coffee mugs that are pretty cool. We've got one that says, "My karma ran over your dogma." And we've got one that says, "Unclench." And we've got any number of things you can take a look at there. And that money all goes towards our retreat, our Taoist retreat that we're building in Costa Rica. So I appreciate that. If you ever have any questions, you can send an email to info@daoananda.com, info@daoananda.com. I know the .com works for the email. Don't ask me why. You can also send that to .org. It's all very confusing. But a very cool thing happened, and we got an email from someone asking, could we discuss and break down for her Chapter 6 of the Tao Te Ching? And I get that. Chapter 6 is one of the most kind of mysterious verses, especially when you're right at the beginning of reading this, and he hits you with, Laozi hits you with Chapter 6. But when you sit with it, it also becomes one of the most practical verses. And so that's what we're going to do today. We are going to discuss and sort of break down how Chapter 6 applies in the modern world and what was the message he was trying to convey. Let me read it to you. It's, depending on the translation that you use, it can say various things, but basically, let me read it to you as it's translated in most of the copies. The valley spirit never dies. It is called the mysterious female. The gateway of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. It is here with us all the while. Draw upon it as you will. It never runs dry. Okay. Thanks for that. I'm sure when people read that at the beginning, 3,000 years ago, they went, all right, cool. Doesn't rhyme, but whatever. But if you read those lines and think to yourself, that's beautiful, but what does that actually mean for me while I'm sitting here staring at my inbox with 200 unread emails? On the surface, it sounds pretty cryptic, pretty mystical, actually, maybe even too mystical to take seriously. I get that. But the genius of this chapter, the genius of that little poem, is it speaks directly to a very modern problem. And that is exhaustion. And that's how most of us live today. We wake up already indebted to a to-do list. We measure our worth by bank balances. We scroll through feeds that constantly remind us that we're not doing enough, not earning enough, not fit enough. And even if we stop to rest, we feel guilty for it. Like we should be squeezing more out of every hour. We live in a world built on that belief, as we talked about in past episodes, that resources, especially our personal energy, are scarce, and that we're always one step away from running dry. Now, listen again to Laozi's words. It is there within us all the while, draw upon it as you will, it never runs dry. Okay, that's not some distant cosmic promise. That is a direct contradiction to the scarcity model that we have here in modern life. Because he's saying there's a source of renewal inside you that doesn't operate like a battery. It doesn't need to be constantly recharged with caffeine or motivation hacks. It's not something that you can buy by taking a vacation or getting an app subscription. Because what he's talking about is the Tao itself. The same current of energy that moves through the seasons, that grows the trees, that brings life back in the springtime, is always there. It's always accessible, and you don't have to earn it. So in the verse, he refers to the valley spirit. Okay, that one we may not really understand because that was very specific to where he lived in his time. In ancient China, valleys were seen as these fertile, life-giving spaces. They didn't demand attention like mountains. They didn't need to dominate. They simply just received and gathered and gave back. So the valley spirit is to be like the valley, to be receptive rather than glowering, to be open rather than rigid. And that's where it ties straight back to modern life. Because modern life is telling you to be the mountain, to be tall, to be rigid, to be seen. But that is exhausting. Whereas the valley spirit is low and soft and receptive. And it's actually what sustains life so that the mountains can exist. Another part of the verse is where he refers to the mysterious female. That's not gender politics. It's not qualities of female only. It's about qualities of nurturing and yielding and renewal. It's about creation through softness rather than destruction through force. Now think about how strange that sounds to us in a culture built on dominance and grind. We don't trust softness. We don't trust yielding. Those are viewed as signs of weakness. But Laozi was saying softness is the gateway, the root of life itself. Now, ask yourself, what would it mean to live as if your energy never ran out. Think about that for a minute. To stop measuring every hour like it was money that you have to budget. Spend an hour, save an hour. Think about how many times you've done that, even just last weekend. This is going to cost me 3 hours. If I rest for 2 hours, I'll feel better so I can continue on for 3 hours after that. Think about trying to live your life where you don't have to do that, to actually trust that there is a deeper rhythm that will sustain you if you just stop fighting. That is the relevance of chapter 6. It's not just a poem about ancient valleys and poetic metaphors. It's about breaking out of the scarcity trap that makes us sick and stressed and convinced that we're running on fumes. So we're going to explore, how do we access the valley spirit in a modern world? How do we trust the mysterious female when everything around us screams for control and strength? And how do we remind ourselves that beneath the noise of scarcity, the fear of running out, there actually is a source that never runs dry? Chapter 6 introduces us to something poetic and puzzling. The valley spirit that never dies, the mysterious female. The gateway of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. So the mysterious female, when you get down to it, was a metaphor in ancient China for the womb, the source of life, the hidden space where growth begins. So we have to be very careful, because if we're not, we're going to read that through a modern lens and assume it's about gender roles or mysticism. But Laozi isn't writing a Hallmark card. That's not the point. He wasn't pointing to something shallow. He's pointing to something much deeper. And that is the principle of renewal. So here's something in the real world that will help you a little bit. Picture a family gathering, okay? And there's always that one person who doesn't talk the loudest, doesn't dominate the conversation, and yet somehow everyone seems to drift towards them. For me, it was my grandfather. But you know somebody like that. It could be an aunt, a grandmother, someone that makes space for others to feel at ease without yelling, "Hey, come over here, pay attention to me." They don't force anything. They don't have to. Because their presence itself is the valley, a place where other people can settle, let down their guard, and feel replenished. And that is the valley spirit that we're talking about. Now contrast that with how you maybe lived your life just today. How many people are pushing to be loud and visible and assertive, constantly proving how much they're worth, trying to crush it at work? If you're not, how many of us have heard the phrase that pics or it didn't happen, right? If you're not posting on social media, you're invisible. It's like we've been trained to only live in the mountains, only live up high, always exposed, always trying to be seen. But Laozi is pointing us to the valley. The valley isn't glamorous. It's fertile, though. It's where the rivers flow. It's where life gathers. It's where renewal happens. It stays warmer longer in the valley. It gets colder later. Think of the soil after a harvest. The valley looks empty after the harvest, but it's in that emptiness it's recovering and gaining strength and getting ready for the next cycle of growth. That is the mysterious female at work. Not exhausted, not used up, but quietly sustaining everything by just being chill. And here's why this matters. Most of us confuse drained with done. If I'm drained, I must be done. We think if we're tired, we've lost our spark. But Taoism suggests the opposite. The spark is the valley. The spark is in rest. It's in receiving. It's in the quiet space that renews us. If you've ever had the experience of having a really stressful day, and then for whatever reason you end up just sort of sitting in a park or sitting by the water or talking with that one friend that can ground you a little more, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a friend you've known for a long time. At that point, you're not adding to your life. You're allowing life to fill you back up. So that's what Chapter 6 is offering. It's not a sermon about femininity or weakness. It's a reminder that the deepest power often looks like stillness or quietness or emptiness. If we can learn to value that, again, human beings used to value that. Human beings didn't just admire it in nature, they practiced it in their own lives. And if we can learn to get back to that, we can tap into a source that really does never die. When Laozi calls the valley spirit, he's pointing us to a quality that often gets overlooked, and that is steadiness. Valleys don't panic when the weather changes. They hold the rivers when the floods come, and they remain after the storm passes. They aren't dramatic like the mountains. But here we are chasing those mountaintop moments all the time. Someone asked me the other day in a response on social media, how many likes did you get on your podcast, or how many views did you get on your podcast, something like that. I said, I don't know. I haven't looked. And they said, how can you not look? Because it doesn't matter whether I look or not. The views are still the same, right? But we chase that high. We chase those social media likes. We want to get some kind of a dopamine fix and a high from looking at that and going, oh my God, I had so many viewers today. Look, I look at them like other people, but this one particular thing I hadn't looked at. Okay. If you look closely, the people who are the most grounded, the most at peace, are not living constantly on the peak. They have found ways to live in the valley, to hold steady. When everything around them is rushing and collapsing and booming, we all know someone like that. If there is a person that you know, that if you know for sure that if chaos is happening, they're going to be calm. They're going to be thinking slower, pulling in positive energy, and radiating that back out. And a very practical way to get to that valley spirit, to live that way, here's a tip right here. Here's your lesson for the day. It's how you listen. Not silence for silence sake, but listening with depth. when someone talks to you, you can either be a wall that they bounce off or a valley that actually cares enough to hold on to their words. Think about the last time you genuinely felt heard. When someone didn't just wait for their turn to talk or completely stared at their phone while you were talking and went, oh yeah, yeah. But when they absorbed what you were saying, that is the valley spirit in action. A space that receives, and in that reception nourishes the person that gave. So you can give that gift to others and it costs you nothing. Another practice is, how do you handle uncertainty? Because our culture now pushes us to have a plan and a goal and a 5-year strategy. Okay. Valleys don't force rivers into straight lines. They let them curve and meander. And sometimes the best way to approach uncertainty is to loosen up. And I don't mean like, hey man, loosen up, dude. Although maybe I do. What I mean is, instead of asking, how can I control this? How can I shape myself? What you should be asking is, how can I embrace and put myself in a position to receive whatever flows in? It doesn't mean giving up. It just means adjusting. Be like the valley that doesn't fight the river, but allows the river to shape itself on the way in. But again, what is another quality of the valley? If the valley was a human being, the valley would be humble. They're not flashy. They're essential. Laozi reminds us that what is low is powerful. Water seeks out the low places. Life grows in the low places. And think about in your life how often you equate the word low with being less than. But low is actually where everything grows. That's where everything comes from. We glorify standing out. Taoism suggests there's a tremendous strength in being rooted, being overlooked but enduring. The valley doesn't need applause to be fertile. It just is. And neither do you. Something that I've forgotten many times in my life, because I had a career in the radio and television business in which I was performing all the time. And it was very hard sometimes to remember that I was probably better when I wasn't performing. And then when I would get back to it, I would be more receptive and people would be more drawn to whatever it was I had to offer. So how do you practice the valley spirit today? Here you go. The next time you feel the urge to prove yourself, to show that you're on top, pause and ask, what would it mean to stay low right here? What would it mean if I was steady instead of spectacular? Sometimes that choice not to rise up but to hold firm is exactly what keeps you connected to the energy, to the Tao that flows all the time. Not reaching out for you because it's already there. It's how you hold space for others. It's in how you move through uncertainty. It's the humility of choosing depth over height, roots over branches, substance over show. In a world addicted to mountaintops, practicing valley living is probably the most radical thing you can do. So if the valley spirit can guide us as individuals, it can also help us make sense of the culture that we ourselves help to shape. Companies chase quarterly profits as if every line on the chart has to climb forever. Every politician promises always more. More jobs, more power, more military strength, more wealth. It sounds noble, sure, but trees don't grow forever. Empires don't expand forever. Mountains erode over time. And what he says in chapter 6, what he says in the Tao Te Ching specifically is reversal is the movement of the Tao. What rises will fall. What grows tall eventually breaks or bends. What surges forward one day will return. So the valley spirit is the counterpoint to this obsession. It doesn't rise, it holds. It doesn't compete to be the tallest. In Taoist thought, that's not weakness, that's endurance. Think about the economic world. .com bubble, housing bubble, crypto bubble, bubble. We're always got bubbles. We got bubbles all the time. They inflate, and everybody acts surprised when they burst. What did you think was going to happen? From a Taoist lens, that is obvious. We see that and go, well, here it comes. Because what rises too fast will collapse. Not a flaw in the system, it's the nature of things. The Valley Spirit reminds us that resilience doesn't come from endlessly climbing, but from having the depth to absorb change. Social levels, we see the same thing. Social media rewards peaks. You want to go viral. You want to be an influencer. You got to have that hot take on sports. And then your peak, and then what? Peaks are lonely places. They don't last. The valley of real relationships, quiet communities, and enduring connections is what sustains us. How many people have chased online fame only to burn out, get exhausted, have mental health problems? You can't live at high altitude if you've got no roots in the valley. Because what's low, or what seems low, is what lasts. But it's hard to battle that, right? Because we start from such a young age, even in our education system. Test scores, college admissions, stacking that resume. The question isn't whether the kids can climb high, it's whether they can stand steady when life inevitably reverses. Because life does always, 100% of the time, reverse. A valley is where the people build their homes. They don't build homes on the top of the mountain. It's not just philosophy, it's survival. Look at the climate crisis. We built the civilization that we have on a mountaintop, on an idea of extraction. More oil, more coal, clear more land, chop down more trees, build more factories. Always more, always higher, always destructive. But the earth doesn't work that way. The earth is valley-like. It's cyclical, it's absorbing, it's regenerating. When allowed to regenerate, look what happened during COVID, when we all stayed inside for a few months. The earth rebounded in ways we couldn't possibly have imagined. maybe less exploitation and more regeneration is what we need. Maybe less extraction and more growing, more balance. And it's easy to hear all this and think, okay, so, Mr. Taoist man, you're anti-growth, you're anti-achievement, you're anti-success. What are you, a bum? No. The Tao doesn't say don't climb mountains. It says don't forget the valley. It doesn't say don't expand. It says reversal is part of the dance, so don't ignore it. The problem isn't the growth. It's the illusion. Listen. The illusion that growth is endless. Okay? It's not. When you honor the valley spirit, you understand that contraction is just as natural as expansion and more inevitable. Rest is just as important at work. Decline is inevitable with every rise. Culturally, that's a radical shift. It means redefining success not as the highest peak, but as the healthiest valley. Not as the loudest voice, but the one that nourishes, the one that gives wisdom, that gives something in return for your attention. There's no permanence at the top, but resilience through the cycle is what you're looking for. Cultures obsessed with peaks eventually collapse under their own weight. Cultures that learn to value the valleys can endure for thousands of years. Steadiness, humility, cycles. It's one thing to nod at the words and say, oh yeah, reversal, cycles, valleys. Yeah, I get it. Makes sense to me, Chief. But it's another to actually live in that world. And live in a way that you embrace those in a world that is constantly pressuring you to be on the mountaintop. How do you bring that valley spirit into your daily life without disappearing from modern society, without failing at work? How do you hold that sense of depth and steadiness when you're being measured by everybody else? Start with conversation. In a world where everybody is talking over each other, being the valley means listening more than you speak. Not passively, not half-assedly, not waiting for your turn, but actually holding space for the other person. It's not that difficult to let their words flow into you in a way that the valley receives the river. Most people remember being truly listened to far more than they remember being impressed by your response. In a small, practical way, you embody softness and gain strength by doing that. Work is another place you can practice. Instead of always rushing to be first in line to take credit, what if you became the person that stabilizes the project, who supports the team, who makes sure that the roots hold? Doesn't mean being invisible. It means valuing depth, quality of your contribution over the sheer number of things that you can stack on a plate. Think of that coworker that's able to steady the room when the meeting gets tense, or the person that catches mistakes before they snowball. That is the valley spirit. Culture trains us to believe that if we're not constantly climbing, we're falling, but valleys remind us the pause is not failure. Retreat is not weakness. If you take time to rest, reflect, or simply stop producing at max output, that's not wasted time, that's fertile time. That's regeneration. Same goes for relationships. It doesn't always have to be the mountaintop. The truth is, relationships endure in the valleys, in the quiet mornings, in the steady routines, in the patience to hold one another through their own reversals. Bringing valley spirit into love means allowing for the low places, the silences, the imperfections, because you know that's where things take root. Even spiritually, whether you call it meditation or prayer or just breathing quietly for a few minutes, you can embody that spirit by emptying yourself. Stop chasing the mystical high. Settle for being low. Become receptive. Something new will emerge in that emptiness, I promise. What makes this powerful is it doesn't require you to renounce modern life. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to decide, I need a job where I don't have to think. No, the Valley Spirit isn't about abandoning the world. It's about moving differently within it. And the irony is when you live like that, people actually notice. Just as rivers flow to the valley, people are drawn to your steadiness. They sense it. They trust it. They come back to it. When the air gets thin at the top, they come back to where you are and go, oh, yeah, I remember. They may not say it out loud, but they do. So where does all this leave us? Chapter 6 might sound poetic, even a little mysterious, but it's really pointing us to something profoundly practical. The way of endurance is not in the peaks. It's a different rhythm. It's not glamorous. Valleys receive, valleys hold, valleys nurture. That's the gift that chapter 6 gives us. And thank you for asking me to break that one down, because I have specific thoughts, obviously. The valley never dies. The spirit of the valley doesn't die. It keeps feeding, keeps holding, keeps enduring. And you carry that same potential inside you. You can be that steady place that outlasts the rush. You can be the one people turn to when everything else collapses. You may not want to be that, and that's okay. But you might end up being that anyway. So as you move through this next week, notice where you've been climbing too hard, where you've been straining for peaks, and ask yourself, where can I embody the valley this week? Where can I listen instead of push? Where can I receive instead of demand? Because the Tao doesn't ask you to be the highest. It asks you to be real. And reality always flows to the valley. There you go. I hope you got something out of that today, and it wasn't too mysterious. But thank you for the email. And if you would like to ask a question, you can do it in various ways. We're also going to have a specific question form on the website. We're going to put that up there very soon. So if you go there right now, you'll probably find it. DAOANANDA. Taoananda.org.com is coming soon. Feel free to email us. Feel free to fill out the form. Feel free to comment on any of the social media platforms where you find this podcast, including, but not limited to, Apple, Amazon, Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and lots of other places. My name is Kit Mann. Thank you so much for coming along today on A Modern Taoist, The Modern Taoist. Darn it. I'll get that right one of these days, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Mann. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform, and thanks again.